The unwavering oath. Dr. Isabella Romano's scalpel danced through the air as she gestured at the holographic display, her dark eyes blazing with the intensity that had made her famous, or infamous, depending on who you asked, across 3 sectors of space. Your circulatory system isn't standard issue across the galaxy, Commander Vextra. So unless you want your patient to bleed out in 17 different colors, I suggest you let me into that operating theater. The Varaxian commander's crystalline exoskeleton flickered with patterns of doubt and authority, a combination that usually preceded a lecture about military protocol. Isabella had seen it often enough during her 3 years as Chief of Emergency Medicine on Starbase Nexus 7. Doctor, the patient is a high-ranking member of the Varaxian Defense Force. Our medical protocols clearly state. Your protocols, Isabella interrupted, don't account for the fact that your officer has a human-designed cybernetic heart. One that I personally helped develop, I might add. So unless you've suddenly become an expert in human cardiovascular engineering, you're about to lose both your patient and your promotion. The emergency bay's lights pulsed with a soft azure glow, reflecting off the commander's crystalline form as he processed this information. Around them, the mixed species medical team waited with barely concealed tension. Dr. Crix, Isabella's Meridian intern, nervously adjusted his feeding tentacles, a sure sign he was anticipating what his human mentor would do next. The regulations. Commander Vextra began again. Isabella's laugh could have cut through hull plating. Let me explain something about human medical professionals, Commander. We spend a decade learning every possible way a body can fail just so we can prevent it from happening. We memorize thousands of procedures, not because we love studying, but because every single one of them might save a life someday. And most importantly, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a surgical whisper. We took an oath that predates your entire civilization's concept of military hierarchy. The commander's crystalline surface rippled with uncertainty. The famous human oath, the one that restricts harm. First, do no harm, Isabella quoted, her lips curving into a smile that had made admirals nervous. But what most people forget is the implicit second part. We will do whatever it takes to save lives, regardless of rank, species, or, she paused meaningfully, outdated protocols. A sudden alarm blared from the operating theater, its urgent tone cutting through the tension like a laser scalpel. The patient's vital signs were deteriorating. Right, Isabella said, already moving past the commander, her medical team falling in behind her with practiced precision. You can either help us save your officer's life, or you can spend the next cycle explaining to your superiors why you let protocol kill one of their best strategists. Your choice. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in cross-species emergency medicine. Isabella's hands moved with the certainty of someone who had learned human anatomy, wasn't the only kind worth mastering. She navigated the complex interaction between Varaxian biology and human cybernetics while calling out instructions in 3 different languages, standard, meridian clicks, and what she dubbed medical shorthand. Crix monitored the synthetic plasma flow. Lieutenant Zara, prepare the quantum stabilizers. And somebody get me a decent cup of coffee. The real stuff, not that synthesized sludge from the mess hall. We're going to be here a while. The operation succeeded, of course. Isabella hadn't spent 15 years pushing the boundaries of xenomedicine to let something as trivial as military protocol stop her from saving a life. As she made her final notes in the patient's file, Commander Vextra approached, his crystalline form now emanating patterns of respect, and perhaps a touch of fear. Dr. Romano, he began, his translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of his native tongue. I owed you an apology. And perhaps a debt. Isabella looked up from her medical tablet, one eyebrow raised. The only debt you owe is to your medical staff, Commander. They've been trying to tell you for cycles that rigid protocols don't save lives. Skilled hands and quick decisions do. Our ways are traditional. Traditional is fine for ceremonies and celebrations, Isabella replied, standing to face him. But in medicine, traditional gets people killed. Human medical history is written in the blood of traditional mistakes we learned from. The commander's surface flickered with curiosity. Is this why human medical personnel are becoming so influential across the galaxy? Your willingness to ignore convention. We ignore convention because saving lives matters more than saving face. Isabella gathered her instruments, each movement precise and practiced. Now, about those emergency protocols you've been clinging to, I have some suggestions, starting with the ridiculous notion that rank should determine treatment priority. As she outlined her proposals, the commander's crystalline form shifted through patterns of shock, disbelief, and finally, grudging acceptance. Word would spread, as it always did, about another instance of human medical authority reshaping galactic standards. But Isabella didn't care about politics or reputation. She cared about the oath she'd taken, older than starships and more powerful than military hierarchy. An oath that had now, thanks to humanity's expansion into the stars, become one of the most revolutionary forces in the galaxy. One more thing, Commander, she added, pausing at the door. Have your quartermaster requisition some real coffee for the medical bay. Trust me, it's as essential as any medical supply. The revolution in galactic medical ethics had begun, armed with scalpels, determination, and properly caffeinated human doctors who simply didn't have time for bureaucratic nonsense when lives were on the line. Protocol be damned. What do you mean quarantine protocols prevent treatment? Dr. Isabella Romano's voice carried the same tone, she usually reserved for malfunctioning medical equipment and particularly stubborn bureaucrats. The holographic display between her and High Administrator Ixtel of the Meridian Health Council showed spreading patterns of infection across 3 different space stations. The situation is complicated. The administrator's tentacles writhed in what Isabella had learned to recognize as diplomatic discomfort. The affected stations house multiple species. Our traditional protocols require segregation of. People are dying while you're sorting them by species. Isabella interrupted, her coffee cup hitting the desk with enough force to make her Varaxian assistant's crystals chime in alarm. Have you learned nothing from the Proxima incident? The mention of that particular disaster made several of the administrator's tentacles curl defensively. The Proxima incident had become infamous in medical circles, a case where strict quarantine protocols had led to unnecessary deaths among mixed-species crews. Dr. Romano, you don't understand. Our medical hierarchies have maintained Order 4. Order? Isabella pulled up her own data displays, filling the air with holographic readouts of deteriorating patient conditions. Does this look like order to you? We have meridians showing symptoms typically only seen in Varaxians. We have humans developing crystalline growths. Something is crossing species barriers, and your precious protocols are giving it time to mutate. Dr. Crix, who had grown from nervous intern to confident chief resident under Isabella's guidance, moved to her side. His feeding tentacles were perfectly still, a sign he was about to back his mentor's play. High Administrator, he clicked in their native tongue. I've studied human medical responses. Their approach to the Terran flu pandemic of 2157 proved that aggressive treatment across population groups is more effective than isolation. Isabella shot her former student a proud look before turning back to the administrator. Listen to your own people. They understand what we learned centuries ago. Diseases don't care about hierarchy or protocols. They certainly don't wait for bureaucratic approval before crossing species barriers. The holographic display flickered as new data streamed in. 3 more cases on Station Delta. 5 on Gamma. The infection was spreading faster than the quarantine protocols could contain it. What would you suggest? Ixtel's tentacles moved in patterns of reluctant consideration. Isabella's response was immediate. Lift the species-based quarantine restrictions. Pool our medical resources. I want mixed-species medical teams on every affected station within 12 hours. We treat everyone showing symptoms, regardless of origin or rank. That would be unprecedented. So is this infection. Choose, Administrator, your protocols or their lives. There was a long moment of silence, broken only by the steady beeping of medical monitors and the soft hum of station systems. Finally, Ixtel's tentacles moved in the pattern that indicated official approval. "You have 24 hours to prove your method effective, Dr. Romano. After that, you'll be too busy updating your medical protocols to worry about giving me deadlines," Isabella replied, already moving to activate her emergency response systems. "Crix, contact Dr. Vena on Station Gamma. Tell her to prep her hybrid medical bay design, the one the bureaucrats called too experimental." The next 20 hours became a blur of activity that would later be studied in medical schools across the galaxy. Isabella coordinated teams of doctors from 5 different species, breaking down centuries of medical segregation in the process. Human doctors worked alongside Meridian biotechs, while Varaxian crystal healers collaborated with Zentaran energy specialists. "The infection isn't just crossing species barriers," Isabella explained during an emergency conference, her hands flying over holographic tissue samples. "It's adapting to each species' unique biology. That's why traditional treatments fail. We're not fighting multiple diseases. We're fighting one disease that speaks multiple languages." Like a medical translator, Crix clicked thoughtfully, his tentacles moving in excitement. "Each strain maintains core characteristics while adapting to host biology." "Exactly." Isabella's grin was fierce. "So we need to stop thinking like separate medical traditions and start thinking like one unified response team. Varaxian crystal healing techniques can stabilize human neural patterns. Meridian biotechnology can adapt to support Zentaran cellular structures." As the hours passed, the infection rates began to slow, then plateau, then finally decline. The combined medical knowledge of multiple species, freed from traditional constraints, proved more effective than any single approach could have been. 23 hours and 17 minutes after receiving authorization, Isabella sent her final report to the High Administrator. The infection was contained. More importantly, they had developed new treatment protocols that worked across species barriers. "Impressive," Ixtel admitted, their tentacles moving in patterns of genuine respect. "Though your methods were unorthodox." "Unorthodox saves lives," Isabella replied, finally allowing herself to sink into her office chair. "Now, about making these changes permanent. You want to standardize cross-species medical cooperation." The administrator's tentacles writhed in shock. "The regulatory committees will never." "The regulatory committees can either adapt or explain why they prefer higher mortality rates," Isabella interrupted, pulling up new data displays. "I'm already drafting proposed guidelines for permanent mixed-species medical teams. Dr. Crix has some excellent ideas about integrated training programs. This will change everything." Isabella's smile was tired but determined. "That's the point, Administrator. Medicine doesn't advance by clinging to tradition. It advances by daring to try what everyone else calls impossible." As the connection closed, Isabella looked around her office at the various certificates and commendations on her walls, artifacts of a career spent pushing boundaries. Next to them hung a simple frame containing the words of the oath she'd taken decades ago on Earth, an oath that had now helped spark a medical revolution across the stars. "Coffee, Doctor," Crix offered, his tentacles arranging themselves in what he'd learned was a passable imitation of a human smile. "Coffee," Isabella agreed. "And then we start writing the future of galactic medicine. I think it's time the galaxy learned that human medical ethics aren't just guidelines. They're a force of nature." Somewhere in the administrative offices of the Meridian Health Council, regulations were already being rewritten. The galaxy's medical protocols would never be the same, and that was exactly how Isabella wanted it. The Grand Medical Assembly of the Galactic Concordat wasn't used to chaos. For millennia, it had been a place of careful order, where medical protocols were debated with all the speed and excitement of crystalline growth. But that was before Dr. Isabella Romano was invited to speak about the success of her cross-species medical integration program. "You want us to do what?" The Zentaran chief medical officer's energy field flickered with such intensity that the translator had to recalibrate. Isabella stood at the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations. The holographic displays behind her showed data from 6 months of implementing her revolutionary protocols. "I want you to throw out your species-segregated medical training programs," she repeated, taking a deliberate sip from her ever-present coffee cup. "They're not just inefficient, they're dangerous. The universe doesn't care about our neat little categories. Disease certainly doesn't. But the traditional methods," began a Varaxian medical elder, their crystals pulsing with distress, "got people killed during the cross-species plague." Isabella cut in. "Or have we already forgotten that lesson? The only reason we contained that outbreak was because we stopped treating different species' medical knowledge as separate kingdoms and started treating them as different tools in the same medical kit." Dr. Crix, now serving as the youngest member of the Meridian Medical Council, raised his tentacles in support. "The human approach has merit. Our integrated medical teams have shown a 47% improvement in emergency response effectiveness." "Improvement by whose standards?" demanded the Zentaran representative, their energy form crackling with skepticism. Isabella's smile had the same quality as his surgical laser, precise and potentially dangerous. "By the only standard that matters: survival rates." She gestured, and new data filled the chamber's displays. "These are the numbers. Cross-species medical teams don't just treat their own kind better, they treat everyone better. A human doctor who understands Varaxian crystalline biology can spot complications a traditional specialist might miss. A Meridian biotech who studies human trauma responses can adapt their techniques in ways we never imagined possible." The chamber erupted in multiple languages, translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping arguments. Isabella waited, her expression reminiscent of a trauma surgeon waiting for the right moment to act. "What you're proposing," the Galactic medical chancellor said finally, their multiple appendages moving in patterns of deep concern, "would require completely restructuring our medical education systems. Centuries of tradition." "Traditions change," Isabella interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of human medical history. "On Earth, we once thought bleeding patients cured disease. We thought washing hands before surgery was unnecessary. Every medical advancement in human history came from someone willing to challenge tradition." She moved through the chamber, her steps purposeful. "We're not just doctors of our own species anymore. We're doctors in a galaxy full of different forms of life. Either we adapt our training to that reality, or we fail in our fundamental duty to preserve life. And how do you propose we implement such radical changes?" The chancellor's tone suggested they expected this question to end the discussion. Isabella had been waiting for this. "Funny you should ask." She gestured and new holograms appeared, detailed plans for an interspecies medical academy. "I've been working with Dr. Crix and representatives from 5 different medical traditions. We've designed a curriculum that integrates multiple approaches to healing. Students won't just learn their own species medicine. They'll learn how different medical traditions can work together." The chamber fell silent as the assembled medical leaders studied the proposals. Isabella could practically see them calculating political implications, weighing traditions against evidence. "This academy," a Meridian elder clicked thoughtfully. "Where would it be located?" "Neutral territory," Isabella replied. "We're converting an abandoned space station in the Proxima sector. Symbolic, don't you think? The site of our greatest medical failure becoming the birthplace of a new approach to healing." "And the instructors?" "The best from every tradition willing to participate. I've already had volunteers from 15 species." She paused, allowing herself a small smile. "Including some of the people in this chamber who've been arguing against the idea." That caused a stir. Several representatives suddenly found their various appendages, tentacles, and energy fields very interesting to look at. "You're asking us to take an enormous risk," the chancellor said finally. "No," Isabella corrected, her voice firm. "I'm asking you to take an oath. The same oath every human doctor takes. The same oath that's driven every medical advancement we've ever made. To put saving lives above tradition, above politics, above our own comfortable certainties. She looked around the chamber, meeting each representative's gaze, optical sensor, or sensory apparatus. The universe is bigger than our individual medical traditions. It's time our medical training reflected that reality. The debate continued for hours, but Isabella could see the momentum shifting. The evidence was too compelling, the logic too sound, and perhaps most importantly, the example of the cross-species plague too recent to ignore. When the final vote came, it wasn't unanimous. Change never is, but it was enough. The Interspecies Medical Academy would become a reality. As the assembly dispersed, Dr. Cricks approached his former mentor, his tentacles arranged in what had become a passably human expression of amusement. "You didn't tell them about the coffee shop you're planning for the Academy's dining hall." Isabella's laugh echoed through the chamber. "One revolution at a time, Cricks. Though I maintain that proper caffeine access is essential to medical education." The galaxy's medical establishment had taken its first real step toward transformation, and as Isabella reviewed the construction plans for her new academy, she couldn't help but think that somewhere, the first doctors who took the Hippocratic Oath would have approved. After all, they too had dared to imagine a better way to heal. Legacy of healing. 5 years after the Nexus Hub crisis, Dr. Isabella Romano stood in the grand auditorium of the Interspecies Medical Academy, watching as the first graduating class of fully integrated medical practitioners prepared to take their oaths. The chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy, each student representing not just their species, but a new era in medical science. "When I first proposed this academy," Isabella began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space, "people said it was impossible. They said different species' medical traditions couldn't be integrated. They said we were trying to break systems that had worked for millennia." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled graduates. Humans standing alongside Viraxians, Meridians floating near Zentarans, and dozens of other species all united by a common purpose. Then the universe decided to teach us all a lesson at Nexus Hub. It showed us that we were never truly separate. Our medical traditions, like our bodies, were always connected. We just needed a crisis to make us see it. The quantum entanglement effect discovered during the Nexus Hub crisis had become the foundation of an entirely new field of medicine. Cross-species quantum healing techniques were now standard practice across the galaxy. The old barriers between different medical traditions had dissolved in the face of undeniable evidence that all healing was interconnected. "Today, you take an oath," Isabella continued. "Not just the human Hippocratic Oath, or the Viraxian Crystal Pledge, or the Meridian Life Bond. Today, you take the first unified galactic medical oath, an oath that combines the wisdom of every medical tradition in known space." Dr. Cricks, now serving as the Academy's co-director, moved to Isabella's side. His tentacles arranged themselves in what had become a perfect simulation of a proud smile. Together, they activated the holographic display, and the words of the new oath appeared in multiple languages. "I swear to preserve life in all its forms, to heal without regard for species or status, to share knowledge across all boundaries, to remember that medicine knows no borders, and to uphold the sacred trust of healing throughout the vast expanse of space." This oath, Isabella explained, is not just a set of words. It's a recognition of what we learned through crisis and triumph, that the art of healing transcends all our differences. Every graduate here today represents a future where medical knowledge flows freely across species boundaries. The ceremony proceeded with each graduate taking the oath in their native language, their voices creating a harmony of commitment that seemed to make the very station hum with energy. As Isabella watched, she remembered all the battles, all the resistance, all the moments when it seemed impossible. The final validation had come just a week ago, when the Galactic Medical Council officially recognized quantum-integrated healing as the new standard for medical practice. The old hierarchies hadn't gone quietly, but they had gone, swept away by undeniable results, and saved lives. Dr. Romano, A young human graduate approached her after the ceremony. "Is it true that this all started because you ignored an admiral's orders?" Isabella laughed, the sound carrying echoes of countless battles with bureaucracy. "It started because I remembered what every human doctor learns, that our duty to heal comes before any other authority. The rest of the galaxy just needed some convincing." "And several thousand cups of coffee," Dr. Crix added, his tentacles moving in amusement. "The coffee was essential medical supplies," Isabella defended with a grin. "You can't revolutionize galactic medicine without proper caffeine support." As she watched the graduates disperse to their new assignments across the galaxy, Isabella reflected on how far they'd come. The Interspecies Medical Academy now had waiting lists thousands of names long. Every major medical facility in known space had integrated healing teams. The old barriers were gone, replaced by a new understanding that medicine, like life itself, thrived on diversity and connection. "You know what the traditionalists are saying now?" Dr. Venna asked, her crystalline form shimmering with amusement. "They're claiming they supported integrated medicine all along." "Of course they are," Isabella smiled, reaching for her ever-present coffee cup. "That's how you know we've won, when they pretend they were on your side the whole time." The legacy of human medical ethics had spread far beyond Earth, transforming into something greater than its origins. The oath that had begun on one planet had evolved to encompass all of known space, its core principle unchanged. The duty to heal transcended all other concerns. As Isabella prepared to welcome the next class of students, she noticed her old framed copy of the Hippocratic Oath had been joined by the new unified Galactic Medical Oath. The ancient words of Earth's doctors now sat beside a promise that spanned the stars, a reminder that some principles were truly universal. "Ready for another year?" Crix asked, already knowing the answer. Isabella's smile was all the response needed. The revolution in galactic medicine was complete, but the work of healing never ended. There would always be new challenges, new species to understand, new techniques to integrate. And that was exactly how it should be. After all, as she always told her students, medicine doesn't advance by standing still. It advances by daring to imagine better ways to heal, by breaking down barriers, and, though she'd never admit it in official reports, by having enough coffee to fuel those long nights of pushing boundaries. The human oath that had once shaken galactic medical ethics had become something far greater, a promise that united healers across the stars, reminding them that in the vast expanse of space, the duty to preserve life knew no boundaries. End of story.